Konnichiwa! As hard as it is to believe, there was a time before the internet, a time before Metacritic and YouTube, and a time where you would have to wait weeks or months to see a review of a game that was highly anticipated. During this time, gamers had to rely on a dark art, and that dark art was checking out the front cover and screenshots on the back of the game box. In today's show, we're going to be checking out 5 games that I would have purchased purely on the cover art and screenshots found on the back of the game box. Essentially, buying the game blind. My name's Mike, and this is the Retro Gamer Boy Show. Now, although many will deny it, there were a fair few gamers during the 80s and 90s that relied on the cover art and screenshots of the game boxes to purchase their games. Trying to pick up a game based on any kind of review was tough. I remember spending hours inside magazine stores, shifting through all the magazines, looking at the latest games and trying to get a sense of reviews. But quite quickly, more savvy gamers understood that the reviews would often be paid for, with huge disparities between one magazine giving a game a 9 out of 10 and another magazine giving it 6 out of 10. It was a time when the review score was the only thing that mattered. You didn't have time to read an entire review for free in a game store before the owner kicked you out. And so you'd flick as fast as you could through the magazine to see any of the games that were hitting 8s and 9s out of 10, because those are the ones you wanted to purchase. Now, more often than not, you'd turn up at the store, see a game that was in your price range, and then go see what the review score was in the magazine. But finding a review for that game was almost close to zero, because the chances are you'd already missed the review. Either it had been in a previous edition of a magazine, or an up-and-coming one. And so if you wanted to buy that game, you pretty much were left with the screenshots on the back and the front cover artwork. Now, I've always loved the front cover and manual art on my game boxes. In fact, as a collector, I'm a box collector. Not necessarily a complete in-box collector, although for my Mega Drive collection, I am trying to get everything complete in box. But the thing I love about these game boxes is the artwork and the screenshots on the back. And I think that really arcs back to when I was a kid and I'd be going into stores, picking up these game boxes and just checking out what the screenshots were like on the back of them. And I can guarantee the game boxes that I used to pick up are the ones that would stand out the most on the shelf. Now, the 80s and 90s were a long time ago for me, so I can't remember the specific games in my collection that I'd purchased just because of the artwork on the front cover or the screenshots on the back. So what I'm going to do is look through the entirety of my collection and pick 5 games that today, if I saw them on the shelf and had no other information apart from the front cover artwork and the screenshots, I would buy in an instant. First on my list is Michael Jackson's Moonwalker for the Sega Master System. Master System games back in the day didn't have the most inspiring front covers. So when you got a game like this, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, where the cover art took up the majority of the box, it really stood out. The artwork's super vivid and it was completely different from everything else that was out at the time. Most things were illustrated or hand-drawn. This really had the feel of a movie poster to it. In fact, it was the movie poster on the front cover of this game art. And then turning it over, the screenshots were stunning. Even back then, I was massively into my beat-em-up games. And to see something like this just looked super awesome. It was an instant purchase for me, and even today, I think if I was to see this on the shelf, it would be something that I would instantly pick up. Next, we have Wrath of the Black Manta on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Back in the heyday of Japanese games development, they did everything right. They did game design right, graphics right, and they did game cover art perfectly. And this here, I think, is the Japanese front cover artwork that was also used on the European versions. And it's just stunning. That manga style artwork is amazing. And looking at it, it really appeals. It's a game that I desperately want to play. I mean, just look how cool it looks. Now, turning it over, by today's standard, you'd be looking at the graphics and thinking it's nothing special. But back there on the NES, this would have been amazing. Just look at those skull figures in the background there. It looks stunning. So back then, as a kid, with no reviews, no magazines to look at, seeing this front cover and those screenshots, they would have had my money. Moving into the 16-bit era, and we have Fatal Fury on the Sega Mega Drive. Hi. The Mega Drive had some of the best artwork of any of the systems. It was just stunning. I mean, just look at the composition and artwork on this box. Now again, Japan would always have some of the best artwork, and every now and then that would filter down to the Mega Drive in other markets, especially in Europe. And the artwork was absolutely stunning. Seeing this on a game shelf, then turning it over and looking at the graphics on the back of the box, it would be like I was looking at an arcade game in a box. This was absolutely stunning, and there's no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't even bother going to look at a magazine review or ask friends what it was like. I would just pick this up and buy it instantly. Next up, Killer Instinct on the Super Nintendo. Now, back in the day when I was hanging out in the arcades, Killer Instinct was one of the must-play games. It demanded your money. Stunning graphics, amazing gameplay. And so when it came out on the Super Nintendo, it was already a must-buy for most gamers because of the reputation. But then if you didn't know about Killer Instinct, just looking at the front cover again would be so alluring. I mean, look at those graphics on the front cover there. You got to remember, as teenagers, as kids back in the late and early 90s, looking at pre-rendered graphics was like magic. Our games weren't displaying this. There were no films out that had this. There were no images being rendered like this. It was absolutely the future for us. And so seeing this and then turning it over and seeing these screenshots where they had those pre-rendered graphics put out in sprites was just mind-blowing. Again, if you knew nothing about Killer Instinct, which would have been an absolute miracle, but if you knew nothing about Killer Instinct and saw this box art and those graphics, there is no doubt in my mind that you wouldn't purchase this. And finally, on the PlayStation 1, it's Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver.
Show yourself, creature. Do you not recognize me, brother? Am I so changed? Elkaya?
Finally, we have Soul Reaver. And this version of the box, and I don't know if I can get it to work, is a lenticular version. So the background warps and changes, and it kind of changes between that twisted world and reality. I don't know if you can see the pillars down here warping and changing. But the really cool thing about this is they also supplied the regular front cover. And it's just an amazing piece of artwork. Now again, the PlayStation was blowing people away already. One of the first 3D console systems out, and it was already producing some amazing looking games. But Soul Reaver was particularly one of the best looking games that came out on the PlayStation. Stunning visuals, amazing gameplay. And we were getting into the era of actually getting demos. So this really was The last time I was looking at games on the shelf and buying them really because of their front cover and the screenshots. There was now an opportunity to actually play these games and test them out before I bought them. But it's still a genre of console where I would go out now and then and pick up a game based on its cover art. And I think Soul Reaver here, with our hero front and center on the front cover, again pre-rendered in this 3D world, is a really alluring box. There's no way you wouldn't pick this up and check out what this game was all about. I love the cover art and screenshots on these old boxes. Like I said, it's the reason why I have a fully boxed game collection here. I have very few games, maybe 10 or 11 games that don't have boxes. Everything else is boxed. Because for me it is about not just the game, which is a huge part of my retro gaming collection obviously, but I also love just looking at the boxes. There's times when I come into this games room and just pick up some of the boxes, look at the front covers, look at the back of the covers. I love that browsing experience of looking at these old games. So those were my 5 games that I would purchase from my games collection just based on the cover art and screenshots alone. What about you? Are there 5 games in your collection that are boxed that you would purchase based on just the cover art? If there are, then let me know in the comments down below. Now if you're new to the Retro Gamer Boy Show and you love retro gaming and what you've seen here today, then why not consider subscribing by clicking on my little pixel head below. And if you want to catch up with our regular Monday release of retro gaming videos, then you can click on the little notification bell, which is just underneath this video. But why wait until Monday, when you can check out our huge back catalogue of videos covering retro gaming, 2 of which you can find over here.